A pleasure to meet y'all at last. And so, for today, films I should have talked about years ago is more than proud to present a Netflix film. But not just any, one that came out about 2 years ago, known as Leo. This is the inexplicable tale about how a couple of class pets have been around for decades, the same old school, the same old state of Florida, and yet very little that happens. In those 70 plus years, these two guys, Leo the Lizard and Squirtle the Turtle, voiced by the iconic Adam Sandler and Bill Burr, are in fact the setting stones that allow for a movie like this to go into motion. While it mainly takes place in the present day, with the many events leading up to it taking place from when they were both brought into the school for the first time after birth, it eventually gets to the point in which that the setting of this film starts to go on a bit of an adventure outside of their comfort zone. Because you see, these guys can talk. Yeah, no surprise about that. And we've had plenty of other films that had more anthropomorphic style animals to them. If I can name a few, Hellboy, Zootopia, Over the Hedge, and the Five Nights at Freddy's games, just to name a few. But as you probably know by now, Leo was in fact a Netflix film, exclusive of course, but it was in fact directed by the one and only Robert Mariachi. And we know that Marinetti was in fact responsible for a few other projects over the years. He made a best of Saturday Night Live skit, as well as a few independent films here and there. But there was also a Religi Tales. Yeah, a spoof of Veggie Tales. Who would have thought a guy like him would make fun of Veggie Tales in a rather adult manner and eventually go on to create a Netflix film? I mean, certainly not the first time it happened. But anyways though, the events of Leo, after all the backstory leading up to the present goes and gets to the point where in the present time, we get to see Leo and Squirtle start off a nice fresh new year of school. But it's not so nice because they both learn they only have about a year left to live. And what do? Well, in 2024, that's still a good amount of time that they managed to live. But still, what we get to see here are a bunch of new kids that come around. There's this kid that has a drone. There's this kid that has certain eating requirements. There's this kid that has some social life issues going on. It's a nice new clad of characters that we get to play around with here and there. Every now and then, a teacher comes around, a substitute to be exact, because the real teacher is off for some time. And so it's up to the substitute to get things together. Assignments, work days, and all sorts of other stuff planned out. But this teacher, unfortunately, is not a very good person. So these students, unfortunately, have to buckle themselves up for a bit of a rough semester worth of all sorts of drama and chaos. But it turns out Leo and Squirtle might actually be their saving grace. Because what the kids don't know, at least for a little while, is that they can talk. Yeah. No big surprise, as I already said, but that's because what eventually happens is that Leo is taken out of his cage. And one of the students eventually takes him home for the day. It gets to the point where Leo actually starts to talk to her. Yeah, so this becomes a pattern that happens multiple times. And it gets to the point where almost everybody has had at least one conversation with Leo. And you could say the students were more than prepped for the work at hand and for the loads of other stuff that they're going to have to do over time. So Leo was more than a lifesaver at this point for the future of these kids, as well as hopefully handling the not so good nature of the substitute teacher in mind. But what we eventually see is a party that goes down. And while Leo and Squirtle end up getting caught in the crossfire of all this stuff that takes place, it really gets to the point where a trip is formulated. A trip that takes place outside the school. But unfortunately, we get to have Leo make his way through the wild. Yeah, he encounters crocodiles and other animals out there in Florida, and eventually finds the students. Yeah. So when they're able to find their way back, we are able to see the kind of potential that Leo as well as Squirtle are both able to convey, to allow for the students to be their very best, and hopefully to have the teacher be handled with ease once the real one comes back. So you could say the substitute was dealt with in their own manner. But on the other hand, I will say, this was quite a film worth watching. To have Adam Sandler is one thing, as not much has been talked about since Murder Mystery, but regarding newer Adam Sandler films, I'm sure we're going to get a few more down the line. They actually made a sequel to Murder Mystery, believe it or not, and I might have to check it out at some point. There was also a sequel to Knives Out. Yeah, so the Slobbering 20s have been pretty busy with new films. A lot of sequels, a lot of new things. I'm probably going to be on a roll here for years to come. Well, maybe just for this time, I'll probably just stick with the typical, why don't we go all the way to 97? The heck with it. So, my overall rating for Leo is going to be a pretty good 8.0 out of 10.1. So, not exactly masterpiece material, but it still does chalk up to a level in which that we have a character whom is essentially the mediator between the not so good and the very bad. So, the fact that one lizard is able to get an entire class worth of students up and running on their assignments and on many other things that they can possibly do with their life outside of school, including a party or a trip, you can definitely say that he is quite a validator. A character whom has a lot of hope and optimism for the children, and his years of knowledge and wisdom collected from studying all the different students he's seen over the years, and all the comedy that he's ramped up. It really makes him one heck of a character. So, that's about it for today's piece of films I should have talked about years ago, but I'll be back once again tomorrow with more stuff, and I'm also hopeful that I can probably have more new films to cover just as well, because a few bonuses here and there would be a pretty solid idea.